So hello everybody, welcome to our Pandemic Response Employer Concerns and Hot Topics and Cash raffle. My name is Angel Pale, I'm the CEO of EPIA Inc. Welcome to our online class. This class is going to be a CE class, so if you're a SHRM certified HR professional, you'll be getting your credit at the end of the class. We'll be sending you an email with the certificate. And if you're not an HR professional, you will be able to learn all the newest information on the PPP, CARES Act, FFCRA, your employees and raffles and such. So I'm going to tell you the name in Chinese. It's a bilingual environment in the beginning. The webinar is actually going to be all English. So the name of our event in Chinese is 新冠的应对 SHRM HRCI CE 课程热门话题抽奖大放送。所以非常感谢今天大家的来临哈。如果说你是个 HR professional， 你需要一个 certification 的话呢，我们将在课程结束之后会 email 给您。那我现在就先介绍一下我们今天会讲的一些话题。我们有新冠纾困法案最新的 information， 还有我们6月5号通过的 PPPFA， 以及我们的贷款豁免额、员工福利等等有新价的要求。所以如果说今天有任何的问题的话，也麻烦你在这个我们的 chat room 可以告诉我们你所有的问题，我们将会在最后回答你的 Q&A。下一页 ，next page please. Okay. So some housekeeping, we have, other than the webinars, we have monthly raffles. So every month we give a gift for our friends. So how do you sign up? We're going to be showing you some QR codes at the end. You could, through the link available on our social medias, follow us. We have YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and all that good stuff. So, and also attend our monthly webinar, you'll be automatically registered. So everybody here today, hopefully, you can stay till the end. If not, you're already registered for the raffle for next month. But there's so much good information today, and I just want to make sure that you guys all have that information with you at the end. So next page, please. 所以我刚刚讲的就是说，如果说今天除了这些网课之外呢，我们还有每个月会给不同的抽奖的活动。所以今天参加的每一位朋友，您都将会有这个机会得到除了webinar 之外的抽奖的机会。好，那这一页呢，我们是有一个免费的 safety flyer。因为我知道大家都已经是慢慢要开业了哈，之前就是staying at home, working at home 的人，现在都要慢慢的回到公司里面了。所以各位雇主，如果说你今天还已经准备好的话，我们现在你看一下你们 handout 旁边我们右边呢有一个 Go to Webinar 的 Control Panel， 下面有一个叫做 handout 的东西 ，handout 2 of 5。你按一下这个小小的三角形，你就可以 download 这个 safety flyer。那 safety flyer 它是说什么呢？上面就是有告诉大家，你今天如果要来我的公司或来我的店里面，你就一定要戴口罩。那另外呢，还有就是我们公司或者是店里面提供这个 hand sanitizer， 就是手消毒液。然后就是希望说你进了我们店之后呢，你要维持这个6 feet apart。所以都是非常重要的东西，你可以贴在自己的门上，或者是就是你入口的地方，这样子大家都会知道。所以这是免费赠送的。So I'm going to say it in English. This little free safety flyer that you see is available on the handout area, which is on your right-hand side. All you have to do is click on the little triangle. You'll be able to download it. It's called the safetyflyer.png. So what it does is you can put it on your store at the door or at your entrance because everybody is about to open now. So it's something that you can have telling your customers to wear masks. They have to wear a mask before they come in, that you provide hand sanitizers, or even you let them know that you practice 6 feet apart. So safe distance, safe for everybody, but it's a notice to you for free for our attendees. So thank you again for attending. Another thing is we also have this free handout. It's pretty much a book. It's got so many pages. It's important legal documents such as the DOL poster you have to post in your office. that's by law, mandatory, and also information on the EDD, and also the letter to offer to your employees if they want to come back to work. So they will have to decline or accept your letter. So the template that we have is all in here, and it's free for you. Please download it. It's at your disposal. And if you have any questions, definitely give us a call. We have our back office support to support you on any questions that you may have. Next page, please. So more things. So on the poster, we said that you're going to have cash raffles. So we do have 3 winners today, and our cash raffle is $25 gift card or Venmo or Zelle, no questions asked. We just give you free money. So you can come pick up the gift card at our office, or we can just send it to you to your account. So stay with us until the end. We're going to do the drawing, and hopefully everybody wins, but only 3 of you. So in Chinese, 我介绍一下我们今天的 raffle. Can you go back to the last page, please? The raffle, 我们今天有3份25块钱的 gift card 跟现金奖，所以如果说你今天要来我们公司来 pick up gift card 的话，我们非常欢迎，或者是说我们完全也不需要见面，只要是 winner， 我们就一定会把你的这个我们可以 Venmo 或者是Zelle给你这份得奖的奖金。好 ，so next page. So with that said, I want to do an introduction of our speaker today. His name is Paul Roberts. He's our Director of Education, and he's spoken on these topics before. He is very experienced throughout the COVID-19 times. He's been giving tens and hundreds of seminars on these topics, and even until yesterday he was still updating because there's so many new laws coming in. So I will introduce you also Paul in Chinese. So let me finish the Chinese part and you can start speaking. And with that said, I just want to let you guys know that there are 5 parts. We're going to have the introduction, which is what I'm doing now, the CE class given by Paul Roberts, and number 3, we're going to have the Q&A. So please drop your questions in the chat room. And lastly, we're going to do raffle and survey. So with that said, I'm going to introduce you Paul in Chinese, and you can come in after my Chinese. Okay. All right. So Paul Roberts 是我们的教育的总监，他今天呢，在这个疫情当中，他已经给了上百堂的课程。那么呢，他也是在我们给我们的观众也是做过了一次哈，在最开始的时候。那现在因为有很多新的 update， 所以呢，他昨天晚上还在继续 update 最新的法案以及最新的政府的讯息。所以我们今天来欢迎这个 Paul Roberts 来跟我们讲解说，我们现在的疫情当中，我们的公司老板以及或者是HR department 的这个 manager 到底有什么需要知道的新的讯息。So welcome Paul Roberts.
Hey, good morning, everyone, and thank you for that wonderful introduction, Angel. I think it is so cool to hear you do that in multiple languages. It's just so awesome that you're putting this wonderful education on for all of your clients for EPIA and EPIA clients. It's wonderful to have you all here this morning to talk about the pandemic response, everything going on in relation to the coronavirus and how to deal with the many different questions that you certainly are having in relation to everything that's going on with regard to COVID-19. As you know, today's class is accredited for 1 hour of SHRM and HRCI credit. So if you have designations through either of those entities, which you can earn to demonstrate your knowledge and your commitment to your own education in HR, if you have those designations, this class counts as 1 hour of continuing education credit for those designations. So as you heard Angel mention, you will get a follow-up email at the conclusion of this presentation, which contains a lot of really good information. And of course, part of that information is related to the HRCI and SHRM credits that are associated with this class. So if you need those credits, you will find information on how to get those credits for your participation today at the conclusion of our webinar. Again, it's really wonderful to have all of you employers here with us in EPA this morning, and we're really excited to give you our pandemic response class addressing all of the concerns that you certainly have related to COVID-19 and the coronavirus. As you heard Angel mention, my name is Paul Roberts. I work for a company called Ward & Brown General Agency. At Ward & Brown General Agency, we are partners with EPIA, who are committed to serving you and helping you navigate all that you're trying to navigate in the health insurance world, in anything related to health insurance, and especially for this class related to COVID-19. I am the Director of Education and Market Development at the Ward & Brown General Agency, and I work with employers like you up and down the state of California and Nevada and other parts of the country to understand the many challenges in the health insurance space, with the goal of enabling you, the employer, to serve your business, your employees, and comply with the many things you need to comply with as it relates to the law. Now, we really wish that we could all be together in person this afternoon. It would be wonderful to be together. It's unfortunate that we can't, but we're looking forward to getting together whenever we are able to do so. And if we were all together, you would likely see me in my suit, just like you see me right now. But I assume the majority of you am also working from home today. And because I'm working from home, I am in much more comfortable clothes. And this is more of a photo that's representative of what I look like today. As you heard Angel mention, I am highly active in the health insurance industry. I serve on the board of directors for the largest health insurance association in the state of California. I also serve locally at an Orange County chapter, of course, in Orange County, California. And I personally live in downtown San Diego. And it's wonderful to have you here today to learn about everything that's going on in relation to the coronavirus and COVID-19. Now, we last hosted a presentation with EPIA and all of you back on April 10th, covering a lot of these similar items. But of course, a lot has happened from April 10th through today. So we have a lot of new information to talk about to address and get us all on the same page with regard to everything that has happened since the last time we chatted and since the inception of the COVID-19 pandemic that we are all grappling with as a nation right now. But before we get into the class, it's important to understand that our presentation today is not intended to be specific legal, medical, financial, tax, or other advice, and that's because we don't provide those services. This education is put together based on years and years and years of experience working with employers directly working with employers just like you. We know very, very well what you experience in your life as employers, and of course, all of us in EPA are committed to serving you. We've taken all of that experience and put it together to form our class today. And so we hope that you'll learn a lot of good things, which is based on very thorough, conscientious research of everything that's going on in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic. And yes, as Angel mentioned, I have hosted very, very close to at least 50, if not probably closer to 100 different renditions of this educational seminar myself. So I know these laws very well, and I'm really happy to go over them with you this morning and into this afternoon. And as you've heard at the end of our presentation, I'm looking forward to addressing some of those questions and answers that you guys might have show up for you as we go through our class today. You know, what's really unique about the things that we're going to be talking about today is that what's in place right now might not be in place tomorrow. There's multiple reasons for that. The first thing is Congress continues to pulse out multiple phases of congressional relief from Washington, D.C. So Congress is creating new laws, and because of that, the laws are certainly changing, which is why what's in place today might not be in place tomorrow. But furthermore, the laws that the Congress people are creating are happening really, really quickly. The laws are being written very fast, they're being enacted very fast and signed into law. Well, there's a lot of questions that all of us, especially employers, have been asking the departments that are overseeing the enforcement of these laws, like the Department of Labor, Department of Health and Human Services, We're asking them, are there any exceptions to these laws? When do these laws go into place? What happens if I furlough my employee? What happens if I lay off my employee and more? The reason why I'm talking about this is that laws require regulations. Regulations tell us how a law will be enforced in real life, and they explain us in a little bit more detail about how the law will actually work. These laws are being pulsed out very, very quickly and rapidly because the coronavirus and the pandemic is so unique. Congress does not have the luxury of time to think about all those what-if questions that we are certainly asking the lawmakers and the departments that are enforcing these laws. So with that, these departments that are overseeing the enforcement of these laws are releasing regulations that tell us how these laws will be applied in real life. So in addition to Congress writing more laws and coming out all the time, there are regulations that are coming out that expand on those laws that tell us how they will and won't work in real life scenarios. So if it seems like the story is changing, that's because it is. And that's why we're talking about these things today, so that we can all get on the same page. It's important to know, though, for full compliance with the law, it's always best for an employer to seek legal counsel so that they can ensure that they are complying with the law according to their own specific circumstances. Now, we'll be talking about a lot of different things today in our class, and we're going to start by talking about the multiple phases of congressional relief, all of the laws and things that have come from Washington, D.C., and the major changes it brings to our employer market. There have been 4 major phases of congressional relief. 2 of those major phases have created 2 brand new laws that we need to pay a lot of special attention to as employers. The first one is the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, the FFCRA, which creates new paid leave laws for employers that they need to give paid time off to their employees if they are unable to work or telework for reasons related to COVID-19. And it requires benefit protection for their health insurance benefits, and the IRS is helping employers pay for those leaves. There's a lot of questions about those leaves. We'll talk about all of those things today. We'll also be looking at the CARES Act. The CARES Act did many things. It was the most expensive piece of legislation that has ever come out in American history, and it created quite a few things for us employers to be aware of. It created the Paycheck Protection Program, which allowed employers to get loans that do not need to be repaid if those loans are used to maintain payroll, pay rent, and utilities for a certain duration of time. Now, there was a lot of questions that came up as it relates to the Paycheck Protection Program. There was multiple phases that there are multiple laws and multiple changes that Congress created in response to the Paycheck Protection Program, and we'll be talking about all of those things today. We'll also be looking at what a 5th phase of congressional relief might look like. There was something that was passed relatively recently from the House of Representatives, but died when it got to the Senate, and that was called the HEROES Act, and that looked to be the 5th phase of congressional relief. Now, that will not be signed into law as it was written and passed in the House of Representatives, but we're going to take a look at what that law contained, because it gives us a view as to things we might see happen in the near future, as Congress definitely meets right now, is meeting right now and trying to figure out what they can do with regard to a 5th phase of congressional relief. In addition to all of those things, there are some major market updates to be aware of in our health insurance space as it relates to IRS rules, premium-only plans, which allow your employees to pay for benefits on a pre-tax basis, COBRA changes, and more. And we'll make sure to address all of those for you today on our presentation. But first, I want to start by talking about the multiple phases of congressional relief. What's really crazy about the things that we're going to be talking about this morning is that 110 days ago, none of the things that we'll be talking about existed. That is how quickly these laws have been created and how fast our market has changed. And that's why all of us at EPA care so much about getting this information out to you, because it's happening quickly, it's happening fast, and it brings a lot of changes for you to be aware of. Well, back at the beginning of the year, we realized there is a big virus on the horizon, and it looks like it's going to be pretty dangerous and could very well turn into a pandemic. And that, of course, had all of us very worried as an entire globe when we first started hearing about these things at the end of December and early January. Well, the people in Washington, D.C., our Congress people said, well, we don't want this to turn into a pandemic. This could be really, really, really bad for us. We don't want that to happen because if it does turn into a pandemic, we will have to shut down our economy and it could have some really big implications for us. People might have to be inside, etc., which of course all ended up happening anyways. But Congress met back at the beginning of the year and said, look, we need to figure out a way to make this pandemic not grow to as big as it could grow. So we need to come up with a way to stop the virus from the virus itself. We need to stop the virus in its tracks. So Congress said, if we can come up with a vaccine and if we can come up with a way to treat COVID-19 and cure it, well, there will be no threat of this virus. But this virus is brand new and we've never seen it before. So we need to come up with money to help us come up with research and development to develop a vaccine and treatment for COVID-19. And so 109 days ago, on March 6th, the very first phase of congressional relief was passed in Washington, D.C. That created $8.3 billion of funding intended to help us come up with a research and development plan for a vaccine and treatment for COVID-19. I believe all of us on this call know that there is no treatment and there is no vaccine for COVID-19 yet. Now, $8.3 billion is a tremendous amount of money. Unfortunately, though, it just hasn't been enough. You'll see that Congress had to get more money for this reason later in its congressional relief. But that only addressed the very first problem. How do we start even researching a treatment and a cure for COVID-19? We all know as employers what happens when employees are sick and they don't have paid time off from work. What happens is 9 times out of 10, they will end up showing up to work even though they are sick because they cannot afford to take an unpaid day off of work. Well, that has always been an issue, but it's especially an issue now in the light of the new novel coronavirus. The coronavirus, as we know, requires people to be quarantined for 14 days, and it's highly contagious. And so we definitely want people that have the coronavirus, might think they have the coronavirus, or who are required to quarantine to actually do so and stay home and stay away from society so they can get over the virus without having to go back out into the real world and, of course, spreading it to people. So Congress, in its second phase of congressional relief, just 97 days ago, so about 12 days after the first one was launched, Congress created the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. That created $104 billion of funding that helps employers pay for new paid sick time and new emergency family medical leave time in relation to COVID-19. And we'll talk about all of this in detail in a few moments. But that only addressed those two items, research and development for a cure and vaccine, and how to keep sick people who need to be quarantined and stay home, actually home and out of the workplace. There's a bigger issue though, and as this coronavirus continued to linger, Congress has to keep creating laws the longer that it's here, which brought us to our third phase of congressional relief, the Coronavirus Aid, Response, and Economic Security Act, the CARES Act. Now, this one was signed into law 88 days ago on March 27th, 2020. Like I said, this is the most expensive piece of legislation that has ever come from Washington, D.C. And its intent was to stimulate the entire national economy. Because the pandemic grew so quickly, our economy had to shut down. People were not able to go to work. People weren't able to get their money because they weren't working. People couldn't spend their money because businesses are shut down. People couldn't travel, and that creates a really big economic problem. And so Congress created the CARES Act, which intended to solve that. Again, looking to stimulate the entire national economy. The CARES Act created what's called the Paycheck Protection Program, and we'll be talking about this in detail as well, which allows employers who need help during COVID-19 to get a loan that they do not need to pay back so long as they use the loan to pay for their employees' payroll and maintain benefits, pay rent and utilities during COVID-19. Now, that program was super, super, super popular. Because it was so popular, the money was intended to be available for 90 days, but the money ran out in just 13 days. It was a very, very popular program that a lot of employers needed. And again, we'll talk about this in detail in a little bit. But It was utilized very quickly. Certainly there was a need for the program, and because of that, in the fourth phase of congressional relief, Congress passed the Paycheck Protection Program and Healthcare Enhancement Act, which replenished the Paycheck Protection Program funding by adding $484 billion of spend back from Washington, D.C., which also included money for additional vaccine research and testing, because the $8.3 billion that was given at the beginning of March ran out and hadn't been enough. So far, these are the four major pieces of congressional relief that have come from Congress so far. It has been 60 days since we've seen a major piece of legislation come out from Congress, but the coronavirus, unfortunately, is still very much here. And in fact, if you've read the news today, it seems to be growing exponentially in many states across the nation. We certainly thought when the very first congressional relief was passed in March that things would be open again by the end of May, right? Well, here we are at the end of June and things still look largely the same. So Congress is certainly needs to look at creating a fifth phase of congressional relief, which they're doing right now. The House of Representatives tried to get a new law passed, the fifth phase of congressional relief passed. They created the HEROES Act, Health and Economic Recovery Omnibus Emergency Solutions Act, which passed the House of Representatives on May 15th. In order to get a law passed in America, it needs to go through both chambers of Congress. One of those chambers is the House of Representatives. The other one is the Senate. So it went through the House of Representatives, it passed the House of Representatives, but when it landed in the Senate said, we don't like this legislation, so we are not going to approve it. When it got to the Senate, it died. The senators said, look, we know we need to create additional phases of relief. We will be creating those. We just don't like the way it was written as it was created in the House of Representatives. We are all going back to the drawing board and we are working on something now. They are still working on that. There was comments from the president just yesterday saying that they hope to have some new fifth phase of congressional relief soon. Senator Steve Mnuchin said, the Senate Majority Mitch McConnell said just yesterday that they are looking in the Senate to have something created in the middle of July. We'll take a look at what the HEROES Act contained, even though it will not be signed into law, because it gives us an idea of what the Congress people are at least thinking of. And as I told you, what's very unique about these laws is that these are all emergency laws. Like I said, they're being created very, very quickly. Congress does not have the luxury of time to think about how these things are actually going to be applied and be enforced. So with that, further regulation from the departments that are overseeing these laws are required. So the IRS, the Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Labor are all saying, we know that you have a ton of questions about how these new laws are going to work, how they will be enforced, etc. We're trying to figure it out too. We're getting these laws as quickly as everybody else is. We know you have questions, and we will get those questions answered as soon as we are able to. So with all that, the departments that are overseeing enforcement of these laws are releasing regulations that tell us how these laws will be applied in real life. And so hopefully that helps you understand a little bit why things sound like they're changing so much. That's because the coronavirus continues to hang out, it continues to linger, and the longer it's here, the more relief is needed from Congress, and the more things continue to change. In addition to that, new laws require new regulations, which the departments are very, very much trying to get out to us as they figure out enforcement themselves. We want to start by going into detail about the second phase of congressional relief, which is the FFCRA. This one created $104 billion of funding to help employers pay for new paid sick time and new paid family and medical leave time. When employees are unable to work or telework for reasons related to COVID-19, they must provide leave for their employees. A lot of employers said, look, I would love to provide paid time off in general anyways, I just can't afford to do so. And so because of that, the federal government said, you need to offer them paid time off. We realize you probably don't have the money to give them the paid time off, so we are creating $104 billion of funding to help you pay for those leaves. And they're helping employers pay for those leaves by providing them tax credits. Now, the FFCRA went into effect on April 1st. Right now, it is scheduled to end at the conclusion of this year. However, it is widely thought that this will likely be extended. When this law was written and signed on March 18th, we certainly thought that by the middle or the end of summer, all of this pandemic would be behind us. That is not looking to be the case. So when they wrote this law, they said it'll sunset at the end of the year on December 31st. Well, here we are almost in July. Things still look largely the same, and it is very likely that this will need to be extended. In fact, they tried to extend it in the 5th phase of congressional relief. So keep in mind, this will likely be extended. Right now, it is scheduled to sunset at the end of the year. All employers with less than 500 employees must comply with this law. And there's so much attention on this law because before the FFCRA, there had never been a mandate from the federal government for employers to pay employees when they're scheduled to work, but unable to work or telework due to an illness or a need to care for a family member. These mandates are very new from the federal government, which is why there are so many questions about them. So let's take a look at what the qualifying reasons for leave are, and then we'll talk about how much you need to pay employees and how much time they get off for the qualifying reasons for leave. It's important to know that the qualifying conditions work like this. The employee must be unable to work or telework for one of these reasons. Now, there are 6 reasons. The reasons will always be listed in this sequential order because the number of their sequence dictates the amount of time a person can take off, as well as the amount of pay a person can get for their leave. Again, the major caveat is that the employee must be unable to work or telework for one of these reasons. The first one is if the employee is subject to a government order to quarantine or isolate. The second one is if the employee is unable to work or telework because a healthcare provider has recommended that the employee self-quarantine. The third one is if the employee is just not feeling so hot. The employee thinks he has the COVID-19, isn't sure, and wants to seek a medical diagnosis. Well, that person shouldn't be coming to work and should get the medical diagnosis. That person can get leave if they are unable to work or telework for that reason. The fourth one is if the employee is feeling fine, but the employee needs to care for somebody who is subject to a quarantine order or a self-quarantine recommendation by a healthcare provider. The fifth one is when the employee is also feeling fine, but the employee needs to care for a child whose school or place of childcare has been closed or is unavailable for reasons related to COVID-19. And there's a 6th thing in the law. I will tell you, we don't need to worry about this right now. This is when an employee is experiencing any substantially similar conditions as specified by Department of Health and Human Services. So far, Department of Health and Human Services has not specified any substantially similar conditions. The Congress people added this into the law just in case the coronavirus continues to grow beyond our wildest imagination. They wanted some information in the law that allowed the law to adapt if it's needed. So far, they have not had to use number 6, so you don't need to worry about it right now. Just know that it is in there in case it ever needs to be utilized, which hopefully it won't. So let's talk about how long a person can take leave and how much they must be paid for these reasons. The first 3 reasons directly impact the employee. Again, this is when the employee is unable to work or telework because they are ordered to quarantine by the government, they've been recommended by their healthcare provider to quarantine, or they're just not feeling so hot and they're seeking some medical diagnosis for what they believe to be COVID-19. Because COVID-19 can hit anybody, all employees are eligible for this leave, including employees that just started yesterday. And of course, when you get quarantined or need to quarantine, it usually requires you to be down for 2 weeks. So because of that, employees can take leave for up to 2 weeks for this reason. When they take leave, they must be paid at their regular rate of pay. However, the maximum is $511 per day, and because it's a total of 2 weeks, it's $5,110 total. The next one is when the employee is unable to work or telework because the employee needs to care for an individual who is subject to a quarantine order by the government or has been advised by a healthcare provider to quarantine because they're very sick for reasons related to COVID-19. Again, you don't need to worry about number 6 right now because it does not exist. If it does, it would live in this section of the law. Because COVID-19 can hit anybody, again, eligibility for this is all employees, including employees that started yesterday. And because quarantine takes 2 weeks, they can get a duration of up to 2 weeks of leave for this reason if they are unable to work or telework for this reason. The big difference here is the amount of pay though. So employees taking leave for this reason need to be paid at 2/3 of their regular rate of pay. However, the maximum is $200 a day for a total of $2,000. The fifth reason is the trickiest one. This is when the employee is unable to work or telework because the employee needs to care for a child whose school or place of childcare is closed for reasons related to COVID-19. Eligibility and duration works like this. All employees get to take leave for up to 2 weeks for this reason. But we all know that most schools started to close down in the middle of March. Here we are at the end of June. Most schools and childcare providers are still closed. 2 weeks will not get you very long. You need to care for your child who doesn't have a place of school to go to. So because of that, employees that have been employed at their organization for at least 30 calendar days can take an additional 10 weeks leave off for this reason and this reason only for a total of 12 weeks total. The amount of pay here works just like it did for item number 4. Employees taking leave for this reason need to be paid at 2/3 of their regular rate of pay, and the maximum being $200 a day for a total of 2 weeks of $2,000 or 12 weeks, $12,000. Now, a lot of employers are out there saying, look, maybe for an example, I'm an employer with 10 employees, and one of my employees needs to take this leave, and they've been here for well over 30 calendar days. So according to the law, they can take 12 weeks of time off of work. I have to protect their job. I have to protect their benefits. Yes, they will get paid by paid via tax credits, but this is going to bring a very undue hardship to my business because if I let one of my 10 employees go for 12 weeks, I'm losing 10% of my workforce. Is there a way for me to be exempted for any of these things under the FFCRA? And I will say there is a small employer exemption, but it applies to this reason and this reason only. When the employee is unable to work or telework because the employee needs to care for a child whose place of school or childcare provider is closed for reasons related to COVID-19. If the employer has less than 50 employees, it might qualify again for the exemption. It might qualify for an exemption from the requirement to provide leave due to school closures or childcare unavailability. All attorneys I've talked to have said very loud and clear, this is not an automatic pardon for all employers with less than 50 employees. But it's relatively simple for an employer to get an exemption for reason number 5 and reason number 5 only. An authorized officer of the business needs to make a determination and certify that at least one of 3 conditions are met. These are what the conditions are. The first one is that the employee's leave is going to bring a big financial liability to the employer, causing the business to not operate at a minimal capacity, meaning that the employer's expenses are going to exceed available money in the bank and therefore the business can't operate. The second one is that the absence of the employee is going to bring a big substantial risk to the employer's financial health or the operational capabilities because the employee that needs to take a leave is so specialized in their skills and responsibilities or their knowledge of the business. The third one is that there just simply are not sufficient workers who are able, willing, qualified, and available at the time and place needed to perform the labor by the employee requesting leave, and that employee services are essential for the employer to operate at a minimum capacity. So again, if the employer has less than 50 employees and an authorized officer of the business makes a determination and creates an attestation that one of these 3 things is true, then the employer can be exempted for reason number 5 under the FFCRA and reason number 5 only, again, the requirement to provide leave due to school closures or childcare unavailability for reasons related to COVID-19. I told you that the IRS has created a ton of funding, $104 billion to help employers pay for these new types of leaves. IRS is issuing refundable payroll tax credits for this purpose. Of course, it's important to remember that there are maximums per day that employers can pay their employees. Reasons 1 through 3 is up to $511 per day. Reasons 4 through 6 is up to $200 a day, according to this specific situation, which we just all chatted about. But the IRS knows, and all of us know too, that as business owners, we don't always have we don't always have as much money in the bank as we would like to have. The IRS says if you're a business owner, you likely put money into a side bank account to pay us your tax dollars later. If you have money available in that side bank account, you can pull from that to pay for these types of leaves. But a lot of employers, unfortunately, don't always have the reserves that they would like to have. So because of that, the IRS created a new form, Form 7200, where employers can request advance payment of employer credits due to COVID-19. The IRS says when they get this form from the employer, they will process the form and will get money to the employer within 2 weeks, allowing them to make their payroll. So again, employers can tap into the funds that they would otherwise pay to the IRS in payroll taxes, and if they don't have enough funds there to cover that, then the employer can complete IRS Form 7200 again to request an advance payment of the employer credits due to COVID-19. Some really important information to understand related to FFCRA, and I think this is the biggest one, is that the FFCRA leave does not protect the employee from employer actions like layoffs, furloughs, etc., that would have affected the employee regardless of whether taking leave. The FFCRA allows an employee to get paid when the employee is scheduled to work, but is unable to work or telework as scheduled, according to one of those 6 qualifying reasons that we just talked about. If an employee has a day off, or if the employee has a weekend, or the employee is not scheduled to work, the employee has been laid off, the employee has been furloughed. In all of those situations, the employee is not put on a schedule to work. And if they are not scheduled to work, they have no reason to take leave. There's nothing to take leave from. So the FFCRA does not provide leave in those circumstances. Again, the only time the FFCRA provides leave is for one of those 6 circumstances, and only if the employee is scheduled to work, but is unable to work or telework for one of those 6 reasons. Again, if the employee just has a day off, it's a weekend, the government will not pay for that employee's leave because the employee is not taking a leave. Rather, the employee is not scheduled. It's also important to know that employers cannot require the use of company-provided paid time off before an employee uses the FFCRA leave. So if an employee needs to take time off because they're unable to work or telework for one of those 6 reasons, the FFCRA leave goes in first, and then any paid time off is in addition to and gets paid after the FFCRA leaves are exhausted. Also, employers cannot say, you can take this time off under FFCRA, but you need to find somebody to cover your job before you do so. That won't fly. FFCRA leaves cannot be denied, and the employer cannot require the employees to find coverage before taking leave for one of the 6 reasons. It's also important to know that the Department of Labor is very much enforcing this law now. They weren't enforcing it very much for the first 30 days, but those first 30 days have long passed. The Department of Labor is focusing on this law now. One of the biggest things the Department of Labor would like employers to do and is enforcing on employers is that employers need to distribute a model notice that explains everything that we've just chatted about in a language that employees understand so that they know what leaves they're entitled to under the law. There is a 1-page document that employers must distribute to their employees to explain the FFCRA leaves, and if applicable, the employers need to post this page in a common area. Angel and EPIA have translated this document for you, and they will send it to you at the conclusion of this class. It's translated in Chinese, as well as, of course, the English version, which comes directly from the Department of Labor. Remember, as an employer, you must distribute this document to your employees so they understand the leaves and they understand the different laws that are available to them. The next thing I want to chat about is the 3rd phase of congressional relief, which is the CARES Act, Coronavirus Aid Relief and Economic Security Act. This one had the most expensive price tag in American history on a congressional spend. It had a $2.2 trillion price tag on it. And again, its entire intention was to stimulate our national economy because of all the problems that we have related to COVID-19. It was signed into law just 88 days ago, and it did many things. Now, we're not going to talk about this in too much detail, but I do want to cover some of the changes that it brought to the unemployment insurance. It made, for the very first time, unemployment insurance available to people who are contractors, 1099 employees, people who work for the gig economy, such as Uber drivers and Instacart shoppers and more. Traditionally, all of those people are not eligible for unemployment because they are self-employed. But of course, many of those people need unemployment assistance because they are not working. I don't know about you, but I take Ubers all the time. The problem is that I haven't taken an Uber anywhere because restaurants and bars and airports and everything else are closed. The Uber drivers are hurting. The gig economy is hurting. The 1099 contractors are hurting. So for the very first time, the CARES Act created a new type of unemployment that allows those types of employees to get unemployment that is otherwise not available to them. Also, this is a really, really big one for employers to understand, that the federal government created an additional increase of $600 a week in unemployment benefits. Usually for unemployment, when a person gets unemployed and they collect unemployment, they get about 40% of their salary, which is thought that will give a person a kick in the pants enough to go find a job and get back into the employment world and out of the unemployment system. Normally that works okay, I suppose. The challenge is that so many people are being laid off and let go, and so many employers are not hiring or cannot hire anybody because their businesses can't open. We are in a unique situation. So that 40% doesn't really work as well. So because of that, in the CARES Act, the Congress people said, we will just give anybody who's on unemployment an additional $600 per week in unemployment benefits, which is a lot of money, $2,400 a month in addition to whatever they would get before. Right now, this extra $600 a week is available through the end of July, but an extension might very well be coming. But right now, it's set to sunset at the end of July. So if it doesn't change at the beginning of August, people will lose this $600 a week in unemployment benefits and go back to what they normally would have got on unemployment, which is about 40%. Although it's widely thought that this will likely be extended. A big problem though, and this has brought a lot of challenges for employers, is that because of this extra $600 a week or $2,400 a month, many people are making more money in unemployment than they did when they were working. And a lot of that varies on the different states' unemployment benefit generosity. In California, the break-even amount is $26 an hour. If you make less than $26 an hour as a full-time employee, you will actually make more money on unemployment. And that caused a lot of problems for employers who are trying to hire their employees back, and their employees are saying, I don't really feel safe going back, and I'm making more money on unemployment than I was when I was working there anyways because of this law. Remember, I told you the Congress people did not have the luxury of time and did not get to think about these things in detail when they were signing the law. They said, look, we had to write this law quickly. They just passed it 88 days ago. They couldn't sit there and think about this for another week to figure out a better way to go about doing this. And in fact, they said, yes, we knew that this was going to cause problems, but we did not have the luxury of time. We had to get something out. It's the break-even point's even higher in other states. In Washington state, if you make less than $30 an hour, you will actually make more money on unemployment. Mississippi, it's much lower. The break-even is $21 an hour, but still, all of that is relatively high. It's also important to understand, too, that with the CARES Act, unemployment benefits are extended for an additional 13 weeks. That's not the additional $600 a week, but the benefit itself of unemployment, which again, roughly gets people about 40% of their income when they're unemployed, is extended through the end of this year, and that also might be extended later. Some more things to be aware of from the CARES Act. Well, it created economic stabilization for distressed industries. The passenger airlines were hurting, of course. The cargo airlines were hurting. They all needed help. And so additional funding for industries like that were created by the CARES Act. The CARES Act also created the individual rebates that we've heard so much about. Most Americans received payments from the IRS directly for the amount of $1,200, and that was intended to stimulate our economy, give people money to spend because people are not spending money, and that was hurting our economy. But of course, because so many people were not working and people were not getting paid, that went to most people's rent and utilities and did not get the kind of financial economic impact that they were hoping for. It's widely thought that this individual rebate will likely come back in the fifth phase of congressional relief, which we'll talk about in a bit. The CARES Act also created some big programs for employers. Now, I have this one bolded because we'll be talking about this one in detail for the next few minutes. And this is the Paycheck Protection Program. It created $349 billion of funding that says, employers, if you need to get a loan to pay for your payroll, to pay your rent and utilities, we will give you a loan. We've created $349 billion of funding for that. And if you use the loan for its intended purpose, again, to maintain payroll, keep your business open, maintain your rent and pay your utilities, then you do not need to pay the money back. And that was a really, really popular program. It also created the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, the EIDL program, which got most employers $10,000 to kind of get them started on the PPP program. That loan also did not need to be repaid, and it created some other business tax benefits. I want to talk about the Paycheck Protection Program in detail right now because it's such a hot topic. Again, this one came from phase 3. They created $349 billion of funding with the goal of maintaining our American workforce and helping employers pay payroll. The loans that were available were backed by a longstanding Small Business Administration. It's a department that backs up these loans that helps struggling businesses in all times get financial assistance when they need it. The intention here was to help employers, again, maintain their staff, make their payroll, and their payroll includes benefits, by the way, so all the health premiums, pay rent and utilities for 8 weeks. Remember, this was created in March, so they said, look, in March, we'll be over this thing in 8 weeks. Things will be shut down for 2 months at most, and we'll get back to normal. Of course, that ended up definitely not happening. But the way the law was written is that they can use their loans for 8 weeks. And because of that, it can be used to make their payroll and also their rent and utilities. We will let them get 2.5 times their average monthly payroll cost so that they can make their rent for 8 weeks, 2 months, and then also have some money to pay their rent and utilities. That was a problem, though, that was later changed to 24 weeks, which I'll tell you more about in a few moments. The most attractive thing about these loans is that they do not need to be repaid at all, so long as you use them for your intended purpose. You need to maintain your staff, and you need to maintain what you were paying them, or you need to bring them back by June 30th. That was a problem, though, because here we are today on June 24th, many businesses are still unable to operate. That was later changed. Again, as long as the loan is used for the intended purpose, as long as the loans are used for 8 weeks, beginning on the loan's disbursement date, the day that the funds are received, the loan can be forgiven. Well, that is a really big problem. There was also a problem in the law that said this: you need to spend at least 75% of the Paycheck Protection loans on payroll and benefits, and no more than a quarter of it on rent and utilities. So there was a 75-25 rule. But the requirement, again, is that businesses need to use this for 8 weeks, and they need to start using it the day the money is given to them from the bank. Well, think of a bar owner, for example. A bar owner, well, actually, hang on to that thought for a second. Businesses were urged to apply ASAP. There was a $349 billion cap. They said, look, the funds will be available as of April 3rd, and they'll run until June 30th, but there's only $349 billion available. So you want to make sure to get some of the money before it's all gone. With that, businesses ran to the banks, and the money was all utilized in 13 days. Think about that bar owner example I was about to tell you for a second ago. A bar owner has been closed. Let's assume, and most have, a bar owner's operation has been closed since the beginning of March. And they hear you can get this loan for all the things we just chatted about, and it's available on April 3rd, but you want to make sure to get a piece of the pie before it's all gone, so go get that money immediately. Well, a lot of bar owners, for example, and many businesses ran out, got the loans on April 3rd. Well, now they need to use them for 8 weeks. The problem is on April 3rd, the bars are still closed. And on May 3rd, they're still closed. On June 3rd, they're still closed. So for the entire 8 weeks, they were supposed to use at least 75% of the money on payroll, but they have no payroll to make because their business is closed. They need to make sure that they maintain all their employees, but they haven't been able to have any employees because their business has been closed. A lot of these problems were addressed, again, as the coronavirus continued to linger and as Congress had to make some changes in the law. The problem with the problems with the Paycheck Protection Program were massive. Like I said, businesses ran to banks as soon as the funds were available. The banks got there in the morning and said, who do we even serve first? How do we figure out who to do this? The SBA system, the Small Business Administration system, crashed over and over and over again, and the banks just struggled how to meet demand. They didn't know how to service people. They didn't have the systems that they needed in place, et cetera. Which brought us to our fourth phase of congressional relief, though, because certainly if all that $349 billion was supposed to be available April 3rd through June 30th, and it ran out in 13 days, it's a big program that a lot of employers need, and Congress needed to put more money back into it, which brought us to our fourth phase of congressional relief. That's the Paycheck Protection Program and Healthcare Enhancement Act. The goal of that was to bolster small businesses and also create additional money to support hospitals and to expand testing and research and development for COVID-19 treatment. This was signed on April 24th, 2020. And again, it created $484 billion of additional funding. $310 billion of that went back into the Paycheck Protection Program since it was so popular and widely needed. That brought the total government emergency response total spend to close to $3 trillion by the end of phase 4. So the Paycheck Protection Program loans resumed 57 days ago. Funds are only available until the cap, but the funds are still available today. Every weekend, the Small Business Administration releases a report on the paycheck protection loans that have been used so far. This is the most recent numbers as of Saturday. So out of all of the funding available, there was $659 billion there. So far, 4.66 million businesses have taken loans under this program, totaling $515 billion. There's about $128 billion still left in Paycheck Protection Program funding. Remember, I told you that businesses can get 2.5 times their monthly payroll for their total loan? Well, the average size is just $110,000. If that's 2.5 times a payroll, that's telling us that most of the employers who are taking this loan are very, very small, who really need this money. There's nearly 5,500 participating lenders out there that are still taking part in the program. Most of those are the major banks and also credit unions, et cetera. In California, we've had the highest number of loans for small businesses at over 500,000, totaling $67.1 billion, and that's just as of last Saturday. So some more information on the Paycheck Protection Program. Like I said, the funds are still available today through the end of the month. You can get up to 2.5 times your monthly average payroll cost, and the cap is a total of $10 million. You're eligible for this loan if you need the money and you have less than 500 employees. If you are in the food services or an accommodation services, your location is applied on a per physical location basis as opposed to overall collection of employees. That brought a really big problem to employers. How do you apply? Well, you go to any participating banks. There are nearly 5,500 in America, big major banks, credit unions, and more. So how do you apply for that? Again, you need to complete the Paycheck Protection Loan application, and you need to file, the Paycheck Protection Loan application. And when you file for forgiveness, you need to do so within 10 minutes after 10 months after the conclusion of the loan period. Because you can get a loan for 2.5 times your monthly payroll, you need to provide a report of what your payroll is. And you need to make a good faith certification that you're going to use the loan for the purposes that it's intended for, to retain workers, maintain payroll, make mortgage, lease, or utility payments. But you also need to say, we bolded the first one, that the loan is necessary to support ongoing operations given the uncertainty of economic conditions. That's all it says. That's a loaded statement that can mean different things to different people. Remember, I told you in the food services sector, businesses can be evaluated by their work size. So we saw places like Steak Shack or Shake Shack and Ruth's Chris Steakhouse say, well, I have less than 500 employees at all of my locations. I'm going to get loans for all of my locations. They did. They utilized the program really well. But then they came back and looked at this good faith certification, that the loan is necessary to support ongoing operations given the uncertainty of current economic conditions. That made them think, well, is this really necessary? I'm a publicly traded company with a lot of extra funds available to me. Maybe I don't really need the loan. And they were worried about potential fraud and not getting the loans forgiven, et cetera. So a lot of businesses gave the money back. Other personal information, other loan information about the PPP program. There is no personal guarantee required. You don't need to put any collateral for the loan. They're relatively simple to get as long as you make these good faith statements, you fill out the application, and you give your payroll documentation. Like I told you, though, there were a lot of questions and problems with the law. Look, we had that 75-25 rule that says at least 75% of funds must be used for payroll and health benefits and no more than 25% on the rest. Well, what happens, and you need to start using the loans as of the first 8 weeks of the loan disbursement date, which was on April 3rd for many. But what happens if the borrowing business was subject to local shutdown orders and the borrower was not able to pay employees during the covered period because they had no work for them to perform and therefore no payroll to make? A lot of employers were saying, can I just give them really big bonuses so that I can get this loan forgiven? Because certainly I can't pay it back with everything that's been going on. There was also a lot of questions about that good faith statement that we just talked about, that the loan is necessary to support ongoing operations given the uncertainty of current economic conditions. That can mean different things to different people. There was also some language in the law that said in order to get your loans forgiven, you need to rehire any staff that you laid off and you need to restore any reductions in payroll by the end of June 30th. Well, what happens if businesses still can't operate by then? I know many bars are still closed. They are unable to do so because their businesses can't even open. What about those employees who just say, I don't want to come back? Are employers going to get penalized for that? What about employees who resigned or who were terminated for poor performance? All of these had some big question marks that were just recently addressed. Most of them were addressed via the Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act, which was passed earlier this month. It created major flexibilities to address all of the employer challenges that we just chatted about, and it was largely supported by both sides of Congress. So it made some big changes to the things that we just chatted about. So now employers have 24 weeks to spend their Paycheck Protection Program loans through the end of this year. You can still opt for 8 weeks if you want to, but most employers are likely switching to 24 weeks so that they can use the money as it was intended. The 75-25 ratio was dropped to 60-40%. So now no more than 40% can be used on non-payroll expenses. That's a really, really big one for employers. Also, instead of June 30th, employers now have until the end of the year to rehire laid off employees and restore pre-pandemic pay rates. And also, they don't need to necessarily bring back each specific employee, the person. They need to, more importantly, refill a position that was laid off or let go. So if the former employee doesn't want to come back, they can hire a new employee to fill that employee's former position. There was also some other clarity given outside this new Paycheck Protection Flexibility Act that was passed, and it was noted on the Paycheck Protection Program forgiveness application. They said that employers will not be audited for that good faith statement that we talked about, that the loan is necessary to support ongoing operations, et cetera, if the loan was less than $2 million. So if 2.5 times your payroll is less than $2 million, the Small Business Administration says, look, we know that you're a small employer. We're not going to argue with you. We know that you probably do need this money. But if 2.5 times your payroll, for example, is equivalent to $10 million, well, you're a really big employer and you might not need access to this funds. We're going to go back and audit that good faith statement. So that's an important thing for people to know. Also, they said that the employer is not going to be penalized for employees who decline to get rehired, for employees who are terminated just because they aren't performing well, and for employees who voluntarily resign. How do you request loan forgiveness? Well, you need to submit a request to the lender that gave you the loan. You need to include the loan forgiveness application. You got to give documentations that show what your workforce size was before and pay rates were before and what they are now. Of course, you need to provide documentation that shows how you spent the money. You got to give payment. You got to show payments for your eligible mortgage, lease, and utility obligations. And you need to demonstrate that no less than 25% of your payroll was reduced or your staff was reduced by the end of the year. You need to rehire your staff by the end of December in order to get your loan forgiven, and so long as no less than 25% of your staff is reduced or your pay was reduced, your loan can be forgiven. Now, the bank ultimately makes the decision on whether the loan will be forgiven. They have 60 days to do so once the employer gets all their information in there. That date might be extended though, or the time frame might be extended because they have 4.6 million loans to go through so far. That's a lot. Any part of the loan that's not forgiven has a 1% fixed interest rate, and all of the loan payments are deferred for 6 months. However, the loan will continue to accrue interest over the period. Now, the loan is due in 5 years, but you can repay it early. It was formally 2 years until the Paycheck Protection Flexibility Act, which changed it from 2 years to 5 years. So you now have 5 years to pay any portion of the loan that is not forgiven. So let's talk briefly about the CARES Act, the HEROES Act. We just talked about the CARES Act, phase 5 of congressional relief. Like I told you, so far there is not a 5th phase of congressional relief. However, Congress people are certainly meeting and talking about it literally right now. There was just a comment yesterday from the president saying that they hope to get something decided in the next couple weeks, likely in the middle of July. We'll see what happens. The House of Representatives created what's called the HEROES Act. That was passed in the House of Representatives on May 15th. It was then handed to the Senate. When it was handed to the Senate said, we don't like the way that it was written. We're not going to agree to this. So it died when it got there. But the Senate also agrees that they need to come up with some additional phase of congressional relief for us. And so they're working on what that is right now. So the HEROES Act will not get passed as it was written, but I want to show you some of the major things that it contained because it gives us an idea of what Congress people are at least thinking of. Firstly, I'll start by saying the HEROES Act had a price tag of $3 trillion. The CARES Act had a $2.2 trillion price tag. They were aiming to change a lot of the Paycheck Protection Program. Most of the stuff that was signed into law on its own in the Paycheck Protection Flexibility Act, which we just talked about, that changed the 75-25 rule down to 60-40, et cetera, all of those problems that were recently addressed. They were looking to extend the FFCRA's reach and eligibility. So they were looking for all employers to comply with the FFCRA, including employers with more than 500 employees. They were looking to add additional reasons to those 6 that we chatted about, and they were looking to eliminate that small employer exemption for reason number 5, where employees need to take time off to pay for their child, to care for their child who does not have a place of school or child care provider to go to. They were looking to also continue the unemployment benefits through the end, they were looking to continue the $600 a week supplemental unemployment benefits all the way through the end of January 2021. Remember, right now it's still scheduled to sunset. The $600 extra a week in unemployment is still scheduled to sunset at the end of next month. They were looking to also extend $600 a week hazard and incentive pay to all of those employees who have been working at our grocery stores making less than $26 an hour here in America, who are not making as much as the people who are unemployed. That was a problem, and that's something that they were looking to include in the law. Of course, they were looking to give more money to states and local governments. They're looking to bring back that very popular round of direct payments to Americans, most of whom receive $1,200 checks from the IRS. What do we need to know right now? Well, like I said, senators are meeting on the 5th phase of congressional relief like right now. The House of Representatives is trying to take very fast action. The Senate is saying, look, we know we need to take action. We're going a little bit slower. We're being cautious here. So they are both meeting right now and will hopefully come up with something soon. I just read a report late last night that they are expecting something to likely be announced around the middle of July. So we will see how that goes. Lastly, to cover up some additional things that happen in our marketplace, aside from all of these different things from Congress, I want to talk briefly about some insurance market changes outside from all the things we just chatted about. Look, under normal circumstances, if your employees pay for benefits on a pre-tax basis with a POP plan, the IRS will not allow employees to make mid-year plan changes. The only time an employee can make a change to their plan if they're paying with pre-tax dollars is at the conclusion of the plan year. or if the person experiences an IRS-approved qualifying event. If you get married, for example, of course you can change your contributions. You can add your new spouse or your new child if you have a child or whatever it might be to your plan. But aside from those types of qualifying events, a person can't just walk into HR and say, I want to cancel my coverage in the middle of the year if they're paying for benefits on a pre-tax basis. Those are irrevocable. They're called the irrevocable rules in IRS Section 125. This also applies to FSAs. So employees that are contributing to FSAs cannot change their contributions, reduce their contributions, cancel their contributions in the middle of the year. That's how that works. That's how it works. But there's a big problem with COVID-19. A lot of employees are desiring to change their plans or already did change their plans, and the employers wanted to let them. The carrier said you can do that, but employers were always worried about what the IRS would say, because the IRS still says you can't do that from a tax perspective. So recently, at the beginning of May, the IRS announced mid-year enrollment election changes for both premium-only plans and FSAs. Premium-only plans is a fancy health insurance word that means your employees can pay for benefits on a pre-tax basis. It's important to note, though, that the IRS is making some comments, and they're now saying that employees can change their plans mid-year. They can also elect FSAs in the middle of the year. They can change their FSA elections and more, all of which is available in the middle of the year. It's important to know, though, that the IRS can only comment on these things from a tax perspective. The IRS cannot go to employers and say, employers, you need to allow your employees to change their plans. And they can't go to carriers and say, carriers, you need to allow employees to change plans. What the IRS can do, and what the IRS is doing here, is the IRS is saying from a tax perspective, if you change your plans in the middle of the year, we normally would have a problem with that. We don't have a problem with that anymore because of this unique situation. So again, IRS is allowing flexibility for mid-year election changes for group plans and FSAs. The employees from a tax perspective will be allowed from the IRS to enroll in the employer-sponsored plan in the middle of the year for people who decided they didn't want coverage at the beginning of open enrollment and suddenly need it now. They can switch plans within their health program, and also they can enroll in FSA mid-year. They can drop FSA coverage and they can change their FSA payroll contributions, all from a tax perspective. So if the employer and if the carrier or the FSA administrator are okay with this, the IRS is okay with it too. Another change I'd like to talk about briefly is COBRA changes. So there was an emergency regulation that was announced around early of May 2020, and these changes go back retroactively to March 1st. There's major flexibilities for COBRA election periods. COBRA allows a person to continue their health insurance plan once they've lost eligibility for that plan, and they can continue for a duration of time. When a person loses eligibility for that plan, if the employer is subject to COBRA, usually employers with 20 or more employees are subject to COBRA, the employer needs to generate an election form that says, employee, you just recently lost coverage. You can continue this coverage on your own if you want to, but you need to pay the whole premium because you've lost your employer contribution. When a person gets an election form for COBRA, they normally have 60 days to decide whether to enroll. Well, the problem is that many people right now are not getting their mail from their employers because their employers are not going into the workforce to send these things out. So because of this, there is major flexibility allowed for the election period. So now people have until 60 days until after the conclusion of the national emergency, whenever that is, to elect COBRA. Traditionally, they have just 60 days from the day they get notified. Now they can hold on to their election form when they get it, and they can wait until 60 days after the conclusion of the pandemic to elect COBRA. When they do, though, their plan will be retroactively effective back to the first day they lost coverage. There's also major flexibility created for COBRA premium payments. Normally, it is imperative for a COBRA person to pay their premiums on time. But right now, because of the emergency regulation, employers cannot, or carriers and employers cannot terminate COBRA coverage for late or delinquent payments during the COVID-19 national emergency. That's because many people are not working and they need their coverage, but they can't pay for their coverage. So because of that, there's a change in the law where you can't be terminated if you don't pay for your coverage as of March 1st all the way until after the national emergency, whenever that is. Whenever that's announced, All COBRA beneficiaries will have up to 30 days to make all of their outstanding payments whenever the administration declares the emergency is over. We expect health insurance carriers to be very strict about this because they are having to pay claims for people who are not paying their premiums. So as soon as those people are able to pay their premiums back at the conclusion of the pandemic, which we hope is soon, we anticipate employers will be carriers will be very strict about enforcing payment for their plan. Another thing I want to talk about is COVID-19 testing and plans, and we're almost wrapping up here. All testing for the COVID-19 virus must be covered by private health insurance plans without cost sharing. That went into effect with the FFCRA on March 18th, and that lasts until the conclusion of the pandemic. The private health plans also must provide cost-free testing beyond testing that is solely approved by the FDA. Normally, plans only cover treatment, that is approved by the FDA, but because this is happening so fast, not everything can be approved by the FDA, so carriers must cover that. Also, it's important to know for antibody testing that it does not need to be covered without cost sharing. Antibody testing usually must be ordered by a physician and coded as medically necessary to even be covered in the first place. Some carriers are stepping up and saying that they will cover this for free. Others are not. It depends on the health insurance carrier. There is no requirement in the law for them to cover antibody testing for free. But because antibody testing is so new, carriers are advising that tests must be approved by the FDA. Another thing to talk about is changes to HSAs, FSAs, and HRAs. So now, for the very first time, high deductible health plans, which a person needs in order to contribute to an HSA, can cover telehealth services before patients reach their deductible. Also, a major change is that now people that have FSAs, HRAs, and HSAs can go to Rite Aid, Walgreens, CVS, and buy whatever over-the-counter medication they would like without needing a doctor's prescription, which is a major change to those plans. And something that was applauded loudly by the industry, that menstrual care products, tampons, pads, etc., are now considered qualified expenses under these health plans. Last thing I want to talk about is ACA market notes. So far there have been no changes announced to the ACA just yet. The IRS has not indicated what's going on with affordability. Many employers who are subject to the employer mandate calculated all their affordability and all their ratios in January, assuming all of their employees would work as normal throughout the year. Of course, that hasn't happened, and there is a lot of employers out there who are panicking about what's going on with the ACA. The IRS has not commented on this yet. The IRS knows that it needs to make a comment on this. Right now, the IRS is trying to make sure that the $3 trillion that have been spent actually gets to where it's intended to go. The IRS has said, we know you're asking questions about this. Bear with us. We will address them as soon as we're able to. So far, they have not announced anything. Very last thing to be aware of here is that some state exchanges are offering special enrollment periods on the individual exchange. Most of those across the nation have expired. In California, if employees or anybody who wants to get coverage on Covered California, they can do so via a special enrollment on Covered California through the end of the month, which is available for another 6 days. I know that we have covered so much information this afternoon and this morning, and it's been a pleasure and privilege to be here with you. I know that we've got some questions and answers some questions that you'd like me to answer that came up during the webinar. I'd like to turn the presentation back over to our wonderful admin Danielle and Isabella, and also to Angel, so we can get some of these questions answered for you guys. It's been a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Paul, for your informational presentation and also for the CE credit. For at the end, we're putting our question and answer on our own slides. So it's based on the questions that people have submitted to us prior and also during the webinar. So let's just start, because we're running out of time a little bit, but thank you so much for the informational presentation. So let's start with the first Q&A. So current employee is quarantined and waiting for results from COVID tests. What is the employer to do during this period? What government benefits are available to them?
Well, for this one, the FFCRA leave would apply. If the employee is quarantined either by a government order or by recommendation of a healthcare provider, and that employee is unable to work or telework because of that reason, then the employee can get leave under the FFCRA. And the employer must give that employee up to 2 weeks off for this reason, because again, they're quarantined or they're seeking treatment for COVID-19. They're not sure if they've got it. Because of that, they are entitled to 2 weeks of paid time off at up to $511 per day and must be paid at their regular rate of pay.
Okay, thank you for that answer. So the next question is, what if I already repaid all my PPP loans? Is there going to be another opportunity to get a second PPP loan?
Well, congratulations if you've repaid a PPP loan. That's excellent. Sounds like your business is doing great. You know, so far we do not know if there are any other PPP loans of money that's coming. As of right now, the Paycheck Protection Program is set to expire at the end of this month, so just 6 days more. You might be able to go back to the bank to see if there is an additional loan that you can get for your business under the Paycheck Protection Program. But as of right now, we do not know of any further Paycheck Protection Program funding that's coming. However, as I told you, Congress people are meeting right now, and it might be included in a 5th phase of congressional relief whenever they decide what that might be.
Okay, thank you for that answer. I will answer everything in English. If you guys request a Chinese translation, we can send that to you per special request. So for the Q&A for this one is, how long can I keep my employees' benefits after laying them off?
Well, this one really varies by the employer's own policy. I will tell you that there is a federal law that requires employers to create what are called ERISA SPDs, summary plan descriptions, which summarize the employer's policies on eligibility for the plan. Now, I know a lot of employers don't have this, but it is a federal law requirement. So my very first recommendation would be, if you have these ERISA plan documents, you should go back and look at these ERISA plan documents to tell you what happens when a person gets laid off. Do they lose coverage? Do they not lose coverage? That will depend on the rules that are created by the own organization. Now, a lot of carriers have decided to step up and say that if you have laid off an employee, we will allow your employee to continue on their benefits up to a certain duration of time. That varies according to the carrier, and it varies on the it varies by the date with which you ask. Again, if you ask the carrier back in March, they might have a different story that they have now because this continues to evolve. I recommend please sending this question over to Angel, and Angel and I can work together to get a response from the health insurance carrier to let you know what the health insurance carrier is saying about this. Under normal circumstances, when you lay an employee off, they are separated completely from payroll, which means that they should be offered COBRA benefits because they are no longer active employees.
Yes, and thank you for including me in that answer. So I was just going to add that every carrier is having their own rules, and we have the most updated information on that. So if your own agent cannot answer you that question, we're happy to answer you that question based on the different carriers that you may have. Next question, please. How to draft a good faith statement if PPP loan is less than $2 million. Please review what is this statement due. Is it mandatory?
Well, like I said, they just released the Paycheck Protection Program forgiveness application. And on that application, there is a checkbox that says, check here if your loan is worth $2 million or more. If it's not $2 million, then you don't need to check the box. That check mark tells the Small Business Administration that if you have a loan for more than $2 million, then they will go back and ask you for documentation about your good faith statement. If your loan is less than $2 million, which it sounds like yours is here, the Small Business Administration says, we know that you are a small employer. You can get a maximum of 2.5 times your payroll. And if 2.5 times your payroll is less than $2 million, we know you are a small employer. Therefore, we are not worried about the good faith statement. We know all small employers need help right now. What they're mostly concerned about is an employer that has 2.5 times their payroll equal to $5 million. That's a massive employer. They want to make sure that those employers truly need the money and don't have extra reserves somewhere else. It's always a good idea if you're wondering about any of these statements to go back to the lender that gave you your Paycheck Protection Program loan and ask them how to best document the good faith statement if it's needed, because the bank, again, will be deciding on whether your loan will be forgiven or not according to the qualifications listed in the law.
Thank you, Paul. So that concludes our Q&A session. And thank you so much for our Director of Education, Mr. Paul Roberts. I know you guys are on silent, but I believe that you're all applauding for him right now. So thank you, Paul Roberts, and thank you again. And hopefully we could do another presentation when there's updates in the regulations, and just to be with us and with our clients too. Thank you so much. And with that said, we're going to go to the next section of our presentation. Paul, are you still there?
I'm still here.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're so welcome.
Yes, so 我们感谢我们的刚刚的讲师 Mr. Paul Roberts 他刚刚回答了一些问题哈。如果说你们今天需要中文的翻译的话，麻烦跟我们公司联络。那么我们现在来到第二阶段，第二阶段就是我会告诉大家，今天呢我将会 email 我们刚刚presentation 的 copy， 然后加上我们的class 我们刚刚的课程的录制的 recording 在 YouTube 会传达给你。然后另外呢，我们刚刚讲的，我们在右手边的三角形下面有2个不同的这个documentation， 就是雇主需要的可以贴在门上的，另外一些政府的一些需要的文件等等，以及如果说你是一个 HR professional SHRM certification 的这个 certificate， 我们将会 email 给你。所以So we will email all you guys a copy of the PPT, class recording, handouts, and SHRM certifications. So lastly, we are going to our second section. What do we have, Danielle? Yes, so we want to promote also our July events. In July, we're also going to have a monthly raffle, like we mentioned in the beginning. And also our webinar is going to be on immigrants, health coverage, public charge, and specific provisions and exceptions. And lastly, I want to promote the census. We were actually, one of our attendees is from the Census Department, and it's very important to represent your own demographic. So there's a website that you guys can log on to fill out your census. So I appreciate that information. And with that said, are we ready for the raffles, everybody? Okay, so our back office has entered your names. Thank you for sticking to the very end. Thank you, attendees, and we wish you good luck. We're gonna pick out 3 people. Each one of you guys will get a $25 raffle price, and you could select if you want Zelle, Venmo, or just pick it up from our office. So let's do it. Oh, wow, Grace. Thank you, Grace, for attending. And Grace, you are the first winner. We have Suziana Wajaja. Thank you so much for attending. I know you have a very busy schedule, and congratulations. And let us know how you want to receive the prize. Thank you for attending. Agnes So, thank you, Agnes, for attending, and congratulations on winning the raffle. So that is all. That's all the 3 of our winners. And like I promised, here is the, let's make it bigger. Okay, good. So here is all our QR codes. So if you're a website person, you can scan the first QR code. If you're WeChat, you're on WeChat, then you could scan the second one. The third one's Facebook. The fourth one's actually our videos. So you're welcome to subscribe to us or just watch our videos for informational, really short one minute videos on specific topics. And then lastly, we have Instagram. So just open your phone, basically hold your phone, open your camera, and scan the codes, and you'll be lead to the specific pages that you want to follow. So any other questions, you're welcome to email us, call us, or just check out our website. So thank you again, Mr. Paul Roberts, and thank you, my team. Thank you for all the attendees. I hope you guys learned a lot. We provided everything we could have on this topic and with the most updated information. So I wanted to add another good news is that Cover California actually extended their open enrollment until the end of July. So if you're without an insurance and you're not working for a company, or this company is not offering insurance, you're welcome to inquire on how to qualify for the special enrollment. So thank you again. My name is Angel Pale, and 我是裴映琪。非常感谢大家今天的来临，希望你们今天都学习到非常多。那希望大家都可以 scan 这些 QR code 哈，这些二维码，你就可以 follow 我们公司任何新的讯息。那我刚刚讲的就是说，希望大家知道现在加州健保的这个开放期呢，特别开放期又开放到了7月底了，所以现在如果没有保险的人呢，可以跟我们公司联络。So thank you everybody, thank you for accepting my bilingual translation, and hope to see you next month. Bye bye.